Hi, Year 12 students. Now, a number of you have noticed and requested that I complete the final section of Ransom Part 1, which goes from page 27 through to 36. Now, I have to apologize, I actually didn't even realize that I hadn't turned it into a video. So I am going to do that now for you. So just a recap on where we left off then is so he Achilles has just for the first time taken that action of dragging Hector's corpse behind the car, and that was kind of like a recent flashback we talked about. And so at the bottom of 27 we start, and it's back in present tense again, which reveals that the flashback is over, and so now it's 11 days later. It's full sunlight, and the day has begun. Page 28. Achilles moves towards the place where he's been for the last 11 days, which is where the body of Hector is. He observes the men from his home country, his Myrmidons. They are clear-spirited and secure in their animal nature, unacquainted with second thoughts. And I felt like that really was presenting their innocent simplicity, that they follow orders, but also perhaps alongside that idea of innocence is partly why in the next the section on the next page we see that they just can't comprehend Achilles' actions. So there's a description of their families and their farmlands, and basically that idea that they are simple men. They have the minds of hawks, foxes, and wolves, so they're still sharp, they're predatory, but they love him. He has long since won their love, which is page 29. It is unconditional. But when they look at him these days, what they see confounds them. They cannot understand what they see. They no longer know what authority they are under. He is their leader, but he breaks daily every rule that they have been taught to live by. So the significance of rules and morality that Achilles is breaking emphasizes the just the abhorrence, the disgust that his action by defiling the dead is being held in. Their only explanation is that he is mad, he may be possessed, that some god has darkened his mind. Actually, not far from the description of him as he's felt his soul change colour and he kind of descended down to the depths of hell almost in the previous section there. Anyway, he goes past them to where the horses are kept and he orders them, calls his grooms and he orders them, as he has every morning for 11 days now, to lead out his horses. The men obey. They know what he has in mind and they cannot bear to meet his eye. So that description of the body language also emphasizes their disapproval of his act. Perhaps if it was only once, they might be able to understand, but for 11 days, maybe, that's why. But Achilles is like inwardly raging. He wants to pick a fight, almost. But they know how he is these mornings and they take care. Describes that they've cleaned everything off. The chariot wheels have been cleaned. And there's a description of the horses, which I thought was really interesting because later on in the novel, we see the description of the two mules. And I want to shout out to Hunter from Year 12, who gave a fantastic biological definition and explanation of mules, horses, and donkeys. And for those of you who don't know, a mule is the offspring of a horse and a donkey. And it has to be the horse. So the mum is a horse, the dad is a donkey, because the other way around, the donkey wouldn't be able to give birth. I don't know. It was a big long explanation, but thank you, Hunter. So we all know what a a mule is now. Anyway, so there's Baelus and Xanthus, the Achilles' horses. They're not really referred to very much, but there certainly is this description of them having a divine spark. They're immortal, and they have a reason and a sympathy that's almost human. And I might just come to the bottom of 31. At the bottom of 31, the gods continue to defy him. So he can see that Hector's corpse. He looks at Hector's corpse, and his first comment is the gods continue to defy him. Hector lies as if sleeping. His features are those of a young bridegroom, newly refreshed. His locks glossy black as in life, his brow like marble. All the welts and gashes where yesterday bone shone through, smoothly sealed, and the torn flesh made whole again. So this healing, so the gods have healed him overnight, or not healed him necessarily. Actually, the initial wound, the death wound, is still there, but all of the rest of the wounds caused by Achilles' act of vengeance have been restored, emphasizing the gods' disapproval of Achilles' act of vengeance. And this makes him blind with rage, half blind with rage. And he ties him to the axle bar again. And the dogs know, and they are yelping and howling, and having kept so long, I thought they would tear at Hector's body. And Achilles says, no, later, my loves, when he is, sorry, Achilles doesn't say this, the keeper whispers it, when he is finished with the body, then you can have them. Then there is the juxtaposition of the death of the two men emphasized at the bottom of page 32. So Patroclus has had his proper funeral pyre. The ceremonies of death have been given to him, whereas Hector hasn't received those, that same ceremony. And what else Achilles does, which is worth noting at the top of 33, he's cut the throats of the 2 of the 9 dogs that Patroclus kept, dragged a dozen highborn Trojan prisoners to the place, raging and weeping, and still it was not enough. Still his grief was not consumed. So all of these things have been done to try and consume his grief, and it has not worked. And so there's a pile of offerings, and there are these things that have been offered. And Achilles here, middle of 33, certainly worth mentioning that the tears fall inwardly. So he's not actually visibly crying, but he's inwardly crying. So that expression of grief that he can't even bring himself to manifest outwardly. His cheeks are dry. He's so consumed that he can't cry, and he's dedicating this act to you, Patroclus, but it's never enough. This is what torments him. And so then he drags the body, and he's covered in dust. It's interesting that I think he's the physical, so the dust cloud, the dust column climbs. That fact that he's clothed in dust probably represents his shame and his condemnation. The grooms stand with shaded eyes watching. They are also condemning his action. He's grey-headed, and the animals are ghostly grey and foaming. So the physical description, so he's becoming fouled with dust outside as the thing that he trails from his axle bar. So this act of vengeance is dirtying him as well. He's been corrupted. represented by the dirt that is on him. And then he falls, when he finishes, he falls into a deep sleep, which I thought was worth contrasting, because at the beginning of the next section, Priam hasn't slept for 11 days. This last section, page 35, 36, is just one page. It talks about, and what's significant here that I noticed at the bottom here, he's waiting for this thing to break, for something to appear that will break the spell that is on him, the self-consuming rage that drives him and wastes his spirit in despair. Something new and unimaginable as yet will confront him with the need. He's consumed by his grief and he needs this something new and unimaginable. It's interesting because there's a parallel there with what happens in part 2. Priam talks about the need for something new. So both characters have a need for something new. And top of page 36, there is the clogging grey web that enfolds him. Meanwhile, day after day, he rages, shames himself, calls silently on a spirit that does not answer, and sleeps. And that's the end of part 1.